Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Center for Student Learning, for having me today. My name is Kate Whitman-Kamara, and I'm the Director of Educational Programming at the Peace Center. And we are a nonprofit located in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, that specializes in bullying prevention and conflict resolution. And today we're going to talk about understanding and combating cyberbullying, which is a bullying that can be really difficult, especially for parents, to know what to do. We're going to go over what cyberbullying is, how it impacts teens, and some things that you can do as parents, because your role here is even more important than maybe you realize, and you have so much that you can offer your teen in this area. So we're going to get started. And just a little bit of information about who we are at the Peace Center. We are right in Langhorne Borough. We specialize in a few different areas. One is bullying prevention, the other is conflict resolution, and we also specialize in social and emotional learning programs. We are officially the Bullying Prevention Resource Center for Bucks County. And so what that means is that we can provide services that are free to all of you as families. So if you have a child who's struggling with bullying, whether they've been targeted or maybe you're worried that they might be bullying others, the Peace Center is here to help you. And we provide trainings for educators on how to respond to bullying. And we also provide prevention programs in classrooms that hopefully stop bullying from happening in the first place. We also provide interventions in cases of conflict. Schools in Bucks County can call us in and we come in and hold restorative circles, mediations. And you can see right here, we also do leadership trainings for youth. These are some youth from our SPEAK program. So we have a lot of different branches, but today we are going to focus on our bullying prevention branch and especially some resources that can be helpful to you as parents. So first, we're going to start with what cyberbullying is. And there are a few different elements that are really essential to the general definition of bullying, and that includes cyberbullying. The first is that it's persistent. So this isn't something that happens just one time and goes away. It's not a one-time blow up between different students. It is something that keeps happening over and over again. The second element is that it's intentional. So the person who is doing harm is meaning to do harm. They didn't lose their temper and then accidentally hurt somebody. This has been done on purpose. And the third element is that it creates an imbalance of power. And usually with cyberbullying, that would be social power or maybe emotional power. So what I mean by this, for example, when someone is bullying in a social way, it might be creating a campaign to get other kids to not be friends with somebody. It could be making them feel powerless in an emotional sense, so manipulating how they feel or making comments that could impact their self-esteem. That creates an imbalance of power. And of course, since this is cyberbullying, this is any bullying that takes place on an online platform or via texting, not necessarily online, but still through an electronic medium. One of the really important things that I like to talk about both with parents and with kids is how to determine whether you're dealing with conflict or bullying, because both of these situations can be really difficult. They can both be emotionally hurtful, but there are some key differences and you can respond to each of these differently. So we're going to go over first, what is conflict and how do you know? So a conflict can be a disagreement, it can even be a fight, and it can be ugly, right? Like we usually do not like getting into conflict. It can happen once or maybe a few times. Maybe students get into recurring conflict. Maybe they have certain friends who they often have disagreements with. But as you can see here, a conflict involves equal power. So that means that in this conflict, there's not one person saying, no one else can be friends with this person. There's not emotional manipulation happening. There aren't constant calls and text messages that border on harassment. It's equal power, and the two people might be going back and forth in their disagreement. And even if it gets heated or hurtful words are used, it's not intentional meanness. And there are probably genuine apologies when this happens. And so when we have conflict with somebody, we can talk it out. We can ask for their perspective on what's happening. We can request mediation, but all of those things change when we're dealing with bullying. And so here we have what bullying is. So bullying is not a disagreement. It is not prompted by the target. It is instead targeted abuse by one party towards the other party. It is repeated and constant. So like we mentioned a little earlier, it's not a one-time thing. And it's different than recurring conflict because, there's no sort of disagreement or topic that brings this to the surface. It just keeps happening because it almost becomes like a campaign of embarrassing one person. And it involves, I'm sorry about that. I'm going to go back. It involves an imbalance of power. Again, so that this is like the key if you're trying to decide whether your child is in a conflict or if they're being bullied. If they feel totally powerless in the situation, and if anything they do does not make this problem stop, then that's an indication that it's bullying. And it intentionally harms, humiliates, or degrades another person. Again, in conflict, we embarrass someone and we probably apologize. When it's bullying, the embarrassment is almost the point of what's going on. When a child is being bullied, things like typical conflict resolution, using iMessages, having mediation, those things don't really work because it sort of gives the person bullying even more of a chance to have power over the target. And we're going to talk about what you can do when your child is dealing with bullying because those conflict resolution strategies won't work. Here are some types of cyberbullying just to be aware of. So the first really common thing is spreading rumors online. The second one, which is less obvious, is that sometimes students will create fake accounts pretending to be another person. This seems to happen a lot, especially on Instagram. We're going to go over a little bit later how you can report these different things because you can specifically report fake accounts on a lot of social media sites. There's something called doxing. If you hear this word, that means sharing of personal information online. It can be sharing an email address, a physical address, any sort of information, contact information, that's called doxing. Distributing inappropriate photos, and this is something that if you find out this has happened, please contact law enforcement because distributing and possessing inappropriate photos, especially of someone under 18, that's considered a crime. And so that's something that sometimes people don't know is that if you find out this is happening, then you can contact law enforcement about that. Something else is creating burn accounts. So these are accounts that students make where, it might be an Instagram account and it'll be like news of X middle school and a lot of gossip will get posted on there. And sometimes kids don't know like who exactly is doing this, but they know that the account is there. These are really important accounts to report. Sometimes kids engage with them and it's actually way better to just report it. And then threats of physical harm is another type of cyberbullying because we know that this spills over into school and vice versa. So here are some signs, like if you're worried that maybe your child is being bullied, but you don't really know, these are just some things to look for. So if they suddenly withdraw or don't engage a lot with you or their friends, that's a possible sign. Like keep in mind that a lot of these in isolation don't mean that your child is being bullied, but if you see a pattern, then it's a possibility. Sometimes it'll show up as physical sickness, especially headaches or stomach aches. And often with very young children, when they feel anxious, they'll say, I have a stomach ache, and they might not actually have an illness, but it could be the anxiousness that the bullying is causing. If you're seeing this, and you're worried about bullying, I really recommend speaking with your family doctor because pediatricians are trained to recognize bullying. I had a high school student who I worked with once, and it was a doctor who said to the parent, "It sounds like she's being bullied." And then she came forward to her mom about what was happening. So if this is showing up, I would recommend talking with your family doctor, and they might be able to screen and find out whether this is bullying. A change in or loss of friend group, like if suddenly you're not hearing from your kids' friends anymore, or they're not getting together with them, then that might be a sign of some bullying going on in the friend group. Unfortunately, very often kids might be bullied by their friends, and then that's a conversation about whether that's a healthy friend group for them. A fear of going to school in the morning can be a pretty clear sign. A sudden drop in grades. We know that bullying really affects kids academically. And just seeing your kid lacking self-esteem. If they had high self-esteem before and then suddenly they seem to really be doubting themselves or being very self-critical, then that could be a sign that the bullying is really having an impact on them. So, look to see if a few of these things are happening. Again, one in isolation doesn't mean it's bullying for sure, but look and see if you're seeing any of these at the same time, and then you can ask your child some more questions or talk with your child's school or doctor about it. Just some of the impact of cyberbullying. It's a really embarrassing and humiliating thing for kids to go through. You can only imagine if we all think back to the most difficult thing that happened to us when we were kids, and then imagine all of it being broadcast online. It's an extremely emotionally difficult thing for kids to deal with. It makes them feel justifiably very angry. And a lot of isolation. Kids can feel like they're the only one going through this, that they're very alone. Academic struggles, like we said, if you see a very sudden drop in grades, that can be due to bullying, because now school, if the kids bullying online also go to the same school, then school suddenly doesn't feel like a safe place. And so that can lead to a lot of academic struggles. The physical sickness, bullying does impact one's physical health. The way that we are treated and spoken to by others directly shows up in our health, so it can have very real health effects. It can also show up, especially in teens, as disordered eating. That's something that you really want to watch for, especially if the bullying centers on the body, then it can show up as disordered eating. And depression and anxiety. And we'll talk about some mental health resources as well, if that's a concern for you. So there are some ways that you can support your teen, and we're going to go through some do's and don'ts, because there are things that can be really helpful to your teen. And then there are things that might feel helpful that maybe in reality won't work as well. So we're going to kind of go over what works well and what works less well. And so we're going to start with the do's. Keep communication open. And I know that this can be especially hard with teenagers, but we're going to go over some tips for how you can do that. But the very first thing is opening lines of communication, asking questions, even if you don't get answers. Something that I really, really recommend for teens is, if you're watching this and you're a parent, identify at least one other adult in addition to you who your teen can go to and talk to. And the reason I say that is because sometimes as a parent, you might think that your kid will tell you everything, and maybe they do, or maybe initially they might feel embarrassed to tell you something, or they might feel worried to tell you something, or more commonly, they don't want you to worry. And so they might go to somebody else first, who then can sort of give you a heads up about what's going on. This can be an adult at school. It could be another family member, a coach, a friend, somebody else who your child feels safe with. If they're not ready to come to you, they do have another adult who they can have that conversation with. Teaching them privacy settings, and we are going to go over where you can find these settings and how they work. But this is probably the biggest thing that parents can offer their kids that they don't always realize. Sometimes as adults, we feel like kids know social media way better than we do. In a way, that's true. Like they know how to interact on social media in a more sophisticated way than we do, but they don't always understand cyber safety and privacy settings the same way that we do as adults. And so make sure that you know these and that you talk with your teen about them. Do not assume that they know, they might not. Talk with them about when and how to report dangerous activity. And again, this is something that we'll go over, but have an intentional conversation about it. And discuss cyber safety and healthy friendships. One important conversation to have with your teen is that everything they do online is public and permanent, that everything goes to a backup server and it will be there forever. And so it's really easy when kids or adults, when we're doing things online, to do them quickly, but just talking with your kid about how that doesn't go away. And I say healthy friendships here because a lot of times bullying can happen in a friend group. So it's important for your child, whether online or offline, to think about who they want to be friends with and how they want their friend to interact with them. So if they have a friend and maybe it's not bullying, but maybe it's persistent phone calls and text messages and they don't feel comfortable with that, it's really important to talk about boundaries with friends and signs that maybe a friend isn't treating you the way that you would like to be treated. And then gathering evidence of any cyberbullying that might happen. And we will talk about that a little bit later when we get to the reporting section. So these are all of the do's, whether your child is being targeted or if they've never been targeted, like do this all up front. Like this is prevention. Maybe you have a younger teen and they're not online too much yet, but you know that they will be. Have all of these conversations early and often. And here are the don'ts, all of which are like really easy to do and are pretty common, but end up maybe being harmful. The first is minimizing what's happening. So sometimes when we see cyberbullying, especially with kids or with teenagers, it's easy to call it drama. And this can make kids feel really minimized. And it can make them feel like the adult isn't taking seriously what's happening. So making sure that when your teen comes to you with something, that it's not brushed off as, just a phase. That's something we used to hear a lot about bullying. Oh, it's just a phase. I think that now we understand as adults that it's not a phase and that, it's not acceptable to bully. So just making sure that you never use that language with your child of it's drama or it's a phase or it will pass, because even though it will pass in the moment to your child, it feels so important. So making sure that you acknowledge to them that this is important and that it shouldn't be happening. The second one, so this is hard because I think that it's a very natural inclination to say, well, just get off social media, like don't use any of the stuff anymore. Seems to make perfect sense, right? And maybe for adults, like it could make sense to just go off of social media if you're not on it a lot. But for teens, it's really important to remember that social media is very thoroughly an extension of their social life, whether positive or negative. And unfortunately, what can happen when they're made to go off of social media is they find other ways to get on it, whether that's like using a friend's devices or making accounts that you don't know about. Sometimes it can backfire. And what I mean when I say that is that they might just find other ways to get on it, but now they're not going to talk to you about it because they're supposed to be off of it and you want to know what is going on. So keep that in mind. You might want to encourage breaks from certain apps because that can be really healthy, but banning social media altogether is something that could just create a more difficult problem for you down the road and create a problem that your teen doesn't come to you about. The third one is surveilling your teen without permission. So sometimes, you might want to keep an eye on your kid's account, and that can be reasonable, especially for a younger teen, but make sure that they know, talk with them about that because it can be a betrayal of trust if they find out that you've been monitoring their accounts, but they didn't know. So just modeling that, again, open communication, that means that your teen should know, if you can see their accounts and why you want to see their accounts. Sitting down and kind of looking at them together is a much better alternative to seeing them without your teen knowing. And then, now this is one that I've seen, and again, it is a very natural thing to want to do when your child's being targeted, jumping into the fight. And we've had a lot of cases at the Peace Center where a parent has gotten on the phone or sent messages to the other kid. Totally natural thing to do, because when someone hurts your child, it's also hurting you. The problem is that that can ultimately make it worse for your child, and you don't want to say or do anything that could even get you in trouble. So instead of doing this, no matter how much you might want to do it, the better alternative is to screenshot and report everything. That's all, and keeping as quiet as you can on the other end of that phone, and also encouraging your child to not put anything into the situation that could get them in trouble. So just screenshotting, recording, and reporting is really what you want to do. And so here we have some more detailed information about how you can intervene and report. So you always want to gather evidence of what's happening, and there are two ways that you can do this. The first is screenshots, and then the second is screen recordings of anything, of posts, of text messages, of call logs. So I can tell all of you, we have had cases come to the Peace Center through juvenile probation. I would say that even 5 years ago, we didn't have a lot of cases of bullying that ended up going through law enforcement and ending up with charges. In the past 2 years, we've had a couple at the Peace Center. And what has happened is that the parties have had this kind of evidence. And if you have evidence of tons of calls back to back, then the DA's office might consider that to be harassment. So make sure, if your child is going through this, that you get all of that evidence. And just a tip for your teen, if someone is sending them offensive messages or bullying them, even though it can be difficult, it really helps them if they don't write anything offensive back, because what you don't want is, it goes to the school, or if there's physical threats, it goes to law enforcement, and it appears more like a conflict when you know that it's bullying and your teen knows that it's bullying. So you really want that evidence that, yes, this is bullying that's happening. These are the parties that you want to report cyberbullying to. The first is the app that's in use. And like I said, we have some links later that will show you how to do that. And then the second is school officials. If the kids go to the same school, make sure that they know about it. And the third is law enforcement. If there are any threats of physical violence, I do want to add to this that both cases that came to the Peace Center through juvenile probation actually involved some racial slurs, and the other involved anti-Semitic slurs. And so one did have a direct threat of physical violence, but the other, it didn't involve threat of physical violence, but because the anti-Semitic language was so extreme, that did end up being processed through the DA's office. So if your child is being bullied over their identity, I can tell you that the Bucks County DA's office takes that very seriously, and you can report that to law enforcement. You and your team can block or mute abusive users, and reporting those fake accounts. So on Instagram, for example, when you report something, it will ask you why, and your team can select, like, this account is impersonating me, or it's impersonating somebody else. And when you're doing this, make sure that you get as many other people as possible. Maybe your teen has some friends who can also report, to make sure that it gets reviewed and taken down by whatever app they're using. So here are some useful technology features for you as the parent to know. We're going to visit all of these links. So TikTok has actually a whole section on privacy settings specifically for teens. Again, your teen might have no idea about this, but you, as the parent, you want to know. So this is what it looks like. So you can see here that they have a whole bunch of things about how you can have privacy settings on comments on TikTok. Ways that you can have privacy settings on direct messages, because a lot of these apps and a lot of the bullying can happen through this direct message feature. And so this has a whole lot of information about how you can make that safer. So I would recommend going to this section, and you'll get a lot of information about how you can keep your teen safe on TikTok and how they can keep themselves safe. Like right here is a good example. They can actually choose whether they want comments on their videos. It's tricky because a lot of teens really like the validation that they get through these sites, but if they would rather not deal with comments, they can turn them off altogether. They can report them. And so you can go and see all of these different tools available on TikTok. So I would recommend really thoroughly going through these, and then you can go through them with your teen together, because again, they might not know. So let's go back to the slide. This is really interesting. If you have a younger teen, I would recommend this. You can pair your own TikTok account with your teen's account. So you can like be part of their TikTok. Now, again, that does not mean that you write back to the kids on TikTok, right? But it means that you and your teen can set TikTok settings together. This is really good if your teen, 12 is when they can start having these accounts. So we're going to like lump that in with teen. But if your teen is like 12, 13, maybe even 14, everyone is different. But if you have a teen who has just started using this stuff, this could be a really, really good way to go. It can be helpful for parents to sometimes use scaffolding, where you start being like very involved in your child's cyber life. And then as they get a little bit older, you can cut back the controls a little bit, and hopefully they've learned along the way about how to stay safe. But this is a really good option for a teen who is just starting to use TikTok or other social media sites. I'm gonna go back to the slide. Instagram. So here is some information about how you can report bullying on Instagram. This seems to be, it depends on which school I go into. I always ask them which app they use the most. I have actually heard Instagram even more than TikTok, which surprises me. And I've heard a lot of information about bullying happening, particularly on Instagram. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that if you have a teenage girl who uses Instagram, make sure you have a lot of conversations with her about things like body positivity and self-esteem, because Instagram can be a really, really tricky place for teenage girls. They get a lot of messages about what they're supposed to look like. And if they're being bullied on top of that, it's a really toxic combination. It doesn't mean that they can't use Instagram, but make sure that you talk with them about that. And so they have some information here about how you can report bullying, how you can block people, reporting abusive behavior, and keeping things private. So this is a really good place to look on Instagram, and you can see here that they have all of the other privacy settings, but this heading here, staying safe, this has
we're not able to see the actual you going inside the Google with Instagram. We just see the slide.
Oh, you just see the slide? Okay. Let's see. How can I do that? If I stop my share and bring it back up, I think that might work. I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going to share again so that you all can see these sites. Can you see it now? Perfect. Okay, great. So this is basically an extension of Instagram's website, and you all can see now over here, this says staying safe. And this is a particular section all about how you can report bullying, harassment. So you can see here, they have a whole lot of information. So this is all available to you. How do I report a post or a profile? So again, this is if there's a fake profile or a profile that is bullying or posting anything violent, scams or frauds, so someone pretending to be somebody else. This is all how you can report that. So again, if you go to Instagram's website and you click on this staying safe feature, and this link is in the PowerPoint for all of you, this is where you can find information about reporting on Instagram. Over here, could you all see the TikTok, or should I go through the TikTok quickly?
That was my next thing. Would you be able to go back to TikTok?
Yes. We can go through TikTok because this is the other like most popular one. So on TikTok, actually, I'm going to go to this one. So this has the general account privacy settings, and I recommend going through all of them. You can go through it about comments. You can go through it choosing between a public or private account. Something really important is that sometimes, so if your teen is older, their TikTok account is automatically going to be set to public. Like you need to go in and make it private. So your teen should know that. They might think they have a private account, but really it's public. So this right here, teen privacy and safety settings, this is information. So you can see here, ages 13 to 15, your account is set to private by default, but ages 16 to 17, your teen might not even know your account is set to public by default. This means that if you have a 16, 17, or 18-year-old, they actually have to go in and intentionally make sure that they are having a private account. So these are really important things to know. Again, suggesting your account to others, 18 and above, this is set to on, but maybe your 18-year-old doesn't want other people to have access to them on TikTok. So this is a really, really important page for you to be familiar with. So again, we're just going to go back up here. This is on the TikTok support website, and it is called Teen Privacy and Safety Settings. So that is a link in the PowerPoint. And now there's one more, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy and paste it so that you all can, whoops. Let's see, actually, I'm going to stop my share really quickly because this next one is a Snapchat one. And I think that seems to be sort of the other of the big three. And now this one, I actually am not using Snapchat's website. I'm using a link from Internet Matters because I think they had sort of the most thorough overview. So they have this really great article about Snapchat privacy settings. And so they have here different restrictions that you can use. They have step-by-step instructions. It's a really, really good guide about how your teen can stay safe on Snapchat. This does not seem to be as big as it was a couple of years ago, but something important for you all to know about Snapchat, if you don't already, is that Snapchat has the disappearing photos, and you probably know that because they're famous for it. But if your teen is being bullied on Snapchat, it's really important that they record or take a photo of what's going on within that 24 hours, because then it might not be accessible to them. So that's really important to know about Snapchat. And so again, I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint. These are all available to you in the PowerPoint, and I'll be sending that along with the recording of this presentation. So you are free to click through here and really learn about these settings, and then you can teach your teen. Again, this is something that adults assume teenagers know really well, but they actually do not often know them as well as we think they do. And this is all really important for preventing bullying, because if they can choose who has access to them and who doesn't in the first place, then it could prevent some bullying. Not all of it, unfortunately. Things like making burn accounts and fake profiles, you can't prevent it from happening in the first place, but your teen can control who is interacting with them at any given moment, and that is really, really important. Okay, so this is something that I also think is important that sometimes we as adults don't really think about, and that is modeling good online practices for teens. So most of us are online. You will notice I did not include Facebook in that list, and I can send information about Facebook if needed. I didn't include it because teens always tell me we're not on Facebook because that's where our parents are and that's where adults are. Now it's the lame app. That's what I've been told over and over again. And even if they're on, it's usually to communicate with family. And what I've been told is that there's just not as much cyberbullying that happens on Facebook. But most of us as adults are at least on Facebook and maybe Instagram. I don't know about all of you, but I do not understand how to make TikTok videos. I have tried to learn it. It's confusing. But in any case, most of us are online, and our teens notice the way that we behave online. And so these are just some guided questions to ask yourself about your own online communications. The first is a very basic one. What do my own communications and behaviors online look like? So just what is my teen seeing when they see me in an online space? And then I have here, what do we as a family consider to be private or public? So this is really important to talk with your teen about because there might be things as a family that you all decide to not post. This is more cyber safety than bullying, but for example, you might want a family agreement that if you go on vacation, nothing is posted until you come back. So that's just one example, but talking about with your teen, what is shared online and what stays here with us as a family unit. The third one is, how do I handle conflict between friends and family members? Does it ever show up online? So does your teen see that, like, when there's a disagreement with Aunt Sally, everyone on Facebook knows about it, and there's a big argument with Aunt Sally and all of this stuff? If that's what your teen is seeing, then they might be a little more likely to get in an argument online. And you don't want your teen to start bullying someone because they just see a whole lot of back and forth and ugly conversations happen online. And they happen with teens and with adults. It happens across the board. So just pay attention to that as well. And then, do I use social media as a positive space? Social media is not always bad. And I always tell kids this, it can be a really, really wonderful tool. It's all about how you use it. So make sure that you're using social media to have positive connections yourself, to share content that is thoughtful, that is helpful, that your own social media presence does not have negativity going on that your teen might pick up on. So kind of doing that self-inventory. What do I want my teen to see? And who do I want to be in my own online spaces? Here are some tips. We talked about keeping that communication open. Here are some ways to do it with teens because it can be especially hard to do it with your teenager. The first one, I really like this. Instead of saying to your teen, how was your day? What did you do? Asking about the highs and the lows, because it's really easy to ask a teen about their day and you hear nothing happened. It was fine. It was okay. Asking about the highs and the lows might get you some more specific information about what's happening. This next one, I think, is a really great strategy. So talk about what you see online and start a conversation. Play dumb. Be like, help me to understand this. And they'll teach you stuff. So talk about what you see if you're confused about something, and they can kind of teach you, like get in that conversation together. This one I think is really useful too, using news articles or TV shows to start a conversation. Sometimes what can be a really great strategy is if you see a news item and it kind of concerns you, or a TV show or a special about something, you can be like, wow, I just saw this about cyberbullying. Do you think that really happens, or is this an exaggeration? And then they're going to be like, oh no, that really happens. And they'll tell you a whole bunch of stuff. So again, like it can be difficult to go to them and say, tell me about, cyberbullying in your school, or are you being bullied? But if you kind of use a story that you heard somewhere, it can be a good way to enter that conversation in a less threatening way. Ask your teen what they think about online communication. And I have here what their values are. Something that's important for teens to know is that like there is no separation between the online world and the real world. Like the real world is the online world and vice versa. It doesn't begin and end. And whatever their values are and whatever your family values are that you practice in quote unquote the real world, in the physical world, those should be the values that are very clearly on display online. So having a really intentional conversation about what your teen considers their values to be and who they want to show up as, you know, in the physical world and in the online world both. And then here, talk about how your teen can stand up for others. And I really should say for self and others. And we're going to go over that because it's not on your teen alone to stand up for themselves. There should be other kids who step in, and kids are more likely to step in when we teach them how to do it. Now, these are a few strategies. A lot of these we might think of as being in-person strategies, but the truth is that they do translate to online spaces as well. The first, this is usually what teens and also parents think of with bullying, which is confronting the person, right? Saying, stop it, that's not okay. This is sort of the most obvious, but what's interesting is that this is the hardest to do, especially if your teen is an introvert. They might just not feel comfortable. Also, this is sometimes a great strategy. Like if your teen has a friend who is bullying others, great idea for them to confront them and say, that's not okay. Or this is like a really useful strategy for a teen who is well liked and well respected by everyone. When that person stands up, like boom, other people will in fact stop. Most of the time when someone says stop, the bullying stops. However, it's not always a good idea. For example, like if someone's bullying online, and we all have seen this, even in adult spaces, and they're like really getting a kick out of people engaging, this isn't necessarily the best thing to do. So this is just like one strategy. It's the one we often think of, but that doesn't mean that it's always the one to use. Now, the second one is include. So that is inviting someone to spend time with you. It could be in an online space, just like a teen sort of reaching out and like spending virtual time with a person who's being targeted. That can make a really big difference because again, cyberbullying causes isolation. And so just including someone, we don't always think of it as an upstander strategy, but it truly is. Now this one is like perfect for using in online and in-person spaces, and that is complimenting. Sometimes I call this balancing as well. So if someone is being bullied and people are writing like nasty comments on a post of theirs and really mean things, a way to balance it is for your teen to give compliments by saying like, I think this is a beautiful photo. Just like, actually there's a term like love bombing, like a bunch of people just love bombing that particular post, and it balances the negative. So this is an awesome one in person, but it's also a great one online because your teen is now engaging the person targeted, but not the people bullying, right? They're not talking to them. They're talking directly to the poster and saying positive things. It's really an awesome strategy. And then this one is report. So again, you know, this is reporting to the app anything that's going on. And then if there are threats of physical violence, or if there are really serious biases going on, it is taken seriously by law enforcement. And so this is, if it's physical and very serious, it can be reported to law enforcement, it can be reported to the school, and it can be reported to the app. Now remember, to report to the app, all it has to be is mean, right? Like it can just be a mean comment or a mean account. And I don't want to say just mean as minimizing it, but to report online to the app itself, it does not need to involve a threat. It can simply be really mean, diminishing comments, and you can report it. And hopefully the person will be blocked or the account will be taken down. So these are all really great strategies to teach your teen, and the more familiar they are with them, the more likely they are to use them, whether they need to confront someone themselves or stand up for somebody else, these are really good for them to be familiar with. So this is something else that is really, really important. Please do not hesitate to ask for help. If you are worried that your teen's mental and emotional health is suffering, and that bullying has something to do with it, there is absolutely no shame in getting help. Bullying is most often processed as a trauma. So if your teen is being bullied, really pay attention to how their mental health is doing. For some teens, it may not impact their mental health, but for many, 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 it does. The Peace Center, we ourselves are not mental health professionals. And so you can see here that what I'm suggesting you do if you're concerned about this is to reach out to NAMI Bucks County. And I recommend them because things like therapy can be really expensive. And I've so often had families say that this is a real stretch. And what's great about NAMI is that they have a whole bunch of services for free. One of them is that they even have like a check-in group for teens every single week. They can refer you to mental health professionals, and they have mental health professionals on staff who can help your teen for free if they're really, really struggling. So again, just know that it is completely okay to ask for help, and we don't need to expect our kids to like just bounce back when people are treating them so terribly. So please make use of these services if you feel like your teen could use them. And I just want to thank you all for being here with me tonight. This is our website, www.thepeacecenter.org. Again, we do offer coaching to kids, whether they're being targeted by bullying and they need help with being able to stand up and assert themselves, or if you watch this and you're like, I think my child sometimes might be mean to other people, empathy can be taught, and we work with those kids too. We work with any kids who are being impacted by bullying, and we are here for all of you in Bucks County. So please feel free to reach out to us. I'm going to be sending along my email, but it is the letter K, Whitman, WHITMAN, at thepeacecenter.org, and you can reach out to me at any time with any questions that you may have. So thank you again, and have a great night. I lied to you, it was an hour.
Still recording.
Oh, I meant to stop that.